Okay. Well, I figured that you'd be into the football.
Yeah,
Okay, I don't have sound.
fun to
Why not?
watch. Plus
Kansas
my
City.
team is playing, so my team is a playing.
Oh,
So what's new in everybody's life?
I don't have sound. I'm gonna have to go back out and come back in.
Huh.
okay.
Okay.
I
We
had
hear
a fight
you,
with
we don't
Medicare this
hear you
morning.
don't hear us.
Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. I had a fight with Medicare as usual this morning. I got this massive bill for a service, a wellness visit in October, and I don't have any. I met my deductible. There's no reason
Huh.
for this. I told her I wasn't paying it, so see what happens. She said
Wow.
Medicare said that somebody else covered it. There's
Why
no
don't I have sound?
cover it. Crazy people.
We hear you, Shirley.
I don't even hear her.
There we go. I got it.
You got it?
We
Got it.
don't see you. You
Now we
gotta get
can
it
see you. You need to get your video on.
Well, I'll get.
down the
There we
bottom.
go. It's
There
a
she
You
terrible.
are.
is.
Now I
There
see
she
you.
is.
Yeah, here.
That's bad, but it's there. You can't get a good picture of a bad face.
Oh. Oh,
No, Cy Perlis now looks like two books leaning.
I know, I
Yeah.
know.
He always has the cleaning people running back, the cleaning lady
Always,
behind him.
yes. Oh well.
So this, I have a quiet week this week, really.
Good.
Some weeks I've got like 3 doctor visits or whatever, but not this week. Are you go? I'm assuming we're all going to go to Baruch's thing on Sunday.
I was planning on it.
I called the temple to make sure I was on the list. I didn't get over there to get my
I
money in.
paid, so I should be on the
I'm
list.
on the list, but I have to pay the extra 5. It doesn't pay me just to drive down, just to give them the money
But
because
no, I understand. Well, you can do it online too,
yeah.
You can pay it on through the website. Yeah, there's a
But then you gotta pay it that way through a credit card, and then you pay the 3%. So I might as well just.
well, no, I don't think the 3% goes through. I mean, I don't think that's applies now.
I'll
Check
ask.
the website. See what
Oh, all right. I'll check it out.
it's called Ipsy or something like that.
What is it?
Oh, I don't remember the actual name. Hold on.
It's not like Zelle. You mean like paying through Zelle?
No,
No, I don't have. I'm not.
Zelly or something like that, maybe.
Zelle, Zelle. Yeah, but I'm not signed up with that.
Yeah,
You,
but it's on the 18th, not next Sunday.
yeah, it's the 18th.
Oh, it's 2 weeks. Okay,
It's
Yeah,
that's
2 weeks.
right. Because the football is this Sunday, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Cy.
Good
Hey,
morning,
Cy. How you
everybody.
feeling, buddy?
Good morning.
They said, how do you feel? That's how you feel.
Oh, I feel pretty good.
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 Hi, Donna.
Hi, Donna. How are you?
Good, good, thank you. And everybody good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Except Steve and
I've
his
had
nose.
I've had better days. Let's put it that.
Aw.
It doesn't hurt. It's just sore.
Okay.
What's the difference?
What doesn't hurt? It's just, what is that?
Well,
It doesn't hurt.
it doesn't hurt. It's not like in pain.
But what is it that doesn't hurt?
My nose.
Oh,
He has.
oh, don't tell me that because the end of the month they're doing surgery on the last bit of month
Yep.
on my nose.
I know. I know. It's a 3-week process. Trust me afterwards.
Oh goodness.
Sometimes I know that you have to go back. You sit in the in the waiting room, and they make sure that they got everything.
Yep. That was over a month ago when they did that. The
Mhm.
Mohs
Right.
procedure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. That was not fun.
Wave them away.
Well, we're waiting for Rabbi.
By what's 10?
One minute.
Is it? It's just
One
a
minute.
minute of, I guess, right now. What time is
Should I send him a message?
it? 10:59. 10:59, it says
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I have too.
1 minute grace period.
I don't know.
he gets tied up with people, can't help it.
Yeah, he gets on the phone and then
They don't want to go away.
Huh.
Did they vote again on that Mayorkas thing?
Hey,
So
we're about ready to start. You're here, but you're not on the screen. Okay, there you are. All right, now I see you.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hi, how are you, Rabbi?
I'm good. I'm good. How's everyone?
Good.
In there.
Good, good.
when is book club, Pam? Is that 2 weeks from today?
Book club is February 20 something.
First,
Hold it.
Yeah, it has to be a multiple of
21st, 2 o'clock.
okay.
Let me make sure I'm sure I got it on here. Yes.
All right, shall we begin? And people can, come in as they catch up. Let's do the blessing and then we'll go on, Rabbi.
Okay, are you ready?
Ready. Baruch
Baruch
Adonai.
atah Adonai Eloheinu
Eloheinu melech haolam
Asher
asher
kishanu
kishanu
b'mitzvotav
b'mitzvotav
Tzivanu
v'tzivanu
b'tzivanu
lazot
b'divrei
divrei Torah.
Torah.
Blessed are
Blessed are
you,
you,
our
Adonai, our
God,
God,
Ruler of the
ruler
world,
of the world,
who
who
has
has sanctified
sanctified
us with your
your
commandments,
commandments,
and
commanded us
handed
to
us
us
to
to
word
engage the
engage
words of
words of
Torah.
Torah. Amen.
Amen. Okay, Rabbi, let's
Amen.
talk about ethical and ritual mitzvot.
Page 53 this is in the volume 2 of Harvey Field's Torah commentary for our times. Okay. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Richard.
I want to
Hi,
thank
Richard.
Richard for being the moderator of the interfaith panel this past Sunday, which was very successful.
Yes.
Yes, nice job, Richard.
Thank you, thank you.
You're going to have this job forever.
Ah!
Whoever sounds good to me.
Hi, Bernie's here.
I have
There's
a
Bernie.
little noise in the background. They're putting in insulation today into my attic.
Oh,
So
that's like fun.
I think I better turn mute. I don't know. Can you guys hear the noise?
No.
No,
Then I won't worry about it then.
No.
Okay.
I'll let you know if we hear it.
Yep. If not, I can mute you.
Yeah, then I would just put my thing on mute except to talk. So
My laptop speaker is not working. I don't know why.
Say what?
My laptop speaker is not working.
Okay.
I don't know why.
And hi, Pam.
Waiting for he messed. Oh, there you go. Is that better now, Rabbi?
Says it's connected.
Volume turned way down.
I can't hear you now.
Yeah, right.
Can you,
Out, it's going in and out.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Well, the laptop speaker is connected, but it's not working. I don't know why.
Okay.
All right, well,
Technical difficulties.
I'll have to manage as is. Good morning, everyone.
It is.
So today we have a very basic and important differentiation between mitzvot. There's ethical and there's ritual mitzvot. So, who can start us off? What is a mitzvah in a technical sense, right? We know mitzvah has at least two uses. You can use it colloquially. Do a mitzvah. Help Richard with the Interfaith Forum.
A good turn.
Or do a mitzvah. Bring Donna some chocolate cake.
Ooh.
Or Sai can do a mitzvah by giving the leftover chocolate cake from his birthday celebrations to the orphanage so that the orphans can get nice and fat. Or it's a colloquial thing, but in a technical sense, a mitzvah is something more specific. So that's my opening question, is who can explain what is a mitzvah in a technical sense? Marcia, you want to start us off?
Well, something that we're obligated to do as opposed to something that it would be a good thing to do. I would guess the difference would be.
Excellent. So a mitzvah in a technical sense is something we are required to do. It's not something we do because we want to. So if I
got to get back to you. Okay, bye-bye. Yeah, bye.
So if I suddenly am overcome by a desire to do something nice for someone, that's a mitzvah in the more colloquial sense. But here we're talking about things that are not a question of emotional interest, it's a question of requirements. So the mitzvot are requirements. Okay, Marcia, keep going. What else can you say about them?
A lot of them ethical ones, yes. Ethical ones are listed as commandments in the Bible, in the Torah, I would imagine, right?
Okay, yes, Sai.
I'd like to ask the question, when you talk about requirements, are you talking about requirements in terms of without them, you're not Jewish? Or you don't believe? I mean, what's the requirement?
Well, there's mitzvot that are for Jews, and there's mitzvot that were for everybody. So you have the Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach, the 7 mitzvot for the children of Noah. So after the flood, God gave 7 basic mitzvot to everyone. And then you could be an Assyrian, you could be a Hittite, you could even be a Moabite, and you have to observe these 7 commandments. So one of those is setting up a justice system. Another one is not to tear a limb from a living animal like a cow, things like that. Basic things.
So if it's limited,
Yes.
if it's limited to a tribe or a certain group of people, how does that separate it out for the rest of the people in the world? If if I guess with what Sai was saying, he said, are you not Jewish if you don't do them? But if you do them, the Jewish people are required to do them, but that doesn't mean that other people shouldn't be doing them. I think there's a kind of a mixed message there.
Well, the mitzvot that were given to Jews are only mitzvot for Jews, according to traditional Judaism.
Really?
So you wouldn't necessarily want to encourage non-Jews to do some of the mitzvot that were intended just for Jews.
So you wouldn't want people not to
Like
murder?
what, Rabbi?
I'm sorry, Marcia.
You wouldn't want people not to murder?
Well, yeah, that would be one of the 7 mitzvot of Noah. So yeah, but you wouldn't.
Well, what would be
Um,
applicable only to the Jews? I don't understand this.
Well, in Judaism, I mean, Judaism is a tribal religion intended for those who either were originally part of the tribe or have chosen to join the tribe, rather than a universal religion where it was designed for everybody. So, but there were the 7 mitzvot for Noah, for children of Noah, which were basic moral things like do not kill, do not abuse animals. But the ritual things like saying the Shema in the morning and the evening, were for Jews. Now, in the Orthodox to this day, if you're converting to Judaism through the very strictly Orthodox, they will want to see that you're willing to observe all the mitzvot that are for Jews. But until you convert, they will tell you to deliberately not observe at least one thing.
Why?
That doesn't make sense.
I
Why?
guess it
Why?
does, but yeah, it does make sense.
Well, because if you're still not Jewish before you convert, you should not be taking on all the mitzvot because you're not Jewish yet. So, but on the other hand, they don't want to convert you unless you can show that you're committed to following all the mitzvot. So by deliberately choosing one thing, they'll tell you something that's not too important, but that is noticeable. It might be very noticeable, like eating bread on Passover. So they'd say, until you convert, you should deliberately eat bread on Passover. You'd follow every other mitzvah, but that one you wouldn't, because you want it clear to you and to others that you're not yet Jewish. So you're not obligated to observe the mitzvah. So you're doing it because it's training for when you become Jewish, but yet you want to make it clear you're not suggesting that non-Jews should practice all the mitzvot. Yes, Pam.
Is this an Orthodox thing? Because it sure doesn't sound like a Reform thing.
No, it's an Orthodox thing.
Okay.
It's a very strictly Orthodox thing. Yeah.
In
But
Israel,
yes, Donna.
in Israel, one of the things is it's a charity, and you're obligated. And I'm sitting in the beauty shop, and an Orthodox woman comes in with her hand out. The owner of the shop goes over, gets a respectable amount of money, and gives to her. He is obligated to do that for her. She is obligated to do that. It was interesting. My husband went to a barber shop that was literally a hole in the wall, and there was only room for the barber chair, no other chair to sit in. So the owner puts a chair outside on the sidewalk. My husband is waiting to get his hair cut. He's sitting there half dozing with his hands in his lap, and this Orthodox lady comes through and puts money in his hands. She was yeah, she was obligated to do that. So, but only the Orthodox.
Mm-hmm. So if you have a good spot at a good cafe, you can have coffee with your friends and get paid at the same time.
There you go.
All right. But a mitzvah is a technical thing. How many mitzvot are there in Talmudic Judaism?
613.
Yeah, 613. And how is that? That is determined, that number came about because in the Talmud, there's a quote from Rabbi Simlai, who's an otherwise not well-known rabbi, but he said there's 613 commandments. So we accept that because it's in the Talmudic literature. It's not in the Bible. Then it says that there's 248 positive and 365 negative, which total 613. So then the different people with sages in the Middle Ages made lists. And of course, it depends how you make a list. So you could make one mitzvah could be do not kill or hurt anyone. Or you could make a dozen mitzvot, different kinds of hurting. You shouldn't hit him in the head. You shouldn't hit him in the back. You shouldn't hit him in the feet. Those could be three separate ones, depending on how you interpret scripture. So since you want to get 613, depending on how many you break up for a specific area, you have more or less for other things. So each list of the 613 commandments was a little different. But for our purposes here today, they're broken up into two broad categories, ethical and ritual. Okay, any other points before we start reading? Steve, how are you doing?
I'm good. Nose is sore, but other than that, I'm good.
Okay, good. You got a bandage on it?
I do.
Oh, there you
A
are.
big one.
Okay. Wow. Okay, Sai.
It's always been my understanding that a mitzvah was a good thing. And I'm wondering now how these quote unquote good things get established in the first place.
Well, the basis of the 613 commandments is going through the Tanakh and particularly the Torah and making lists. So as you know, it's not like in one chapter they'll talk about, in this chapter, we're going to talk about all the mitzvot related to animals. And in another chapter, we're going to talk about all the mitzvot related to food. And another one, we're going to talk about all the mitzvot related to social action. It's mixed in, and in this week's parsha, there are just a lot of almost random mitzvot, right? So if you look at this week's parsha, if you have your copy of this book, the Tanakh, on page 117, which is chapter 21 of Exodus, these are the rules that you shall set before them. And it starts out with something very peculiar. When you acquire a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years. In the 7th year, he shall go free without payment. And it goes into details about that. So it's a bunch of laws that were just listed. So, the Shulchan Aruch, which was the 16th century, tried to make order of them and put them into, sections depending on the subject. But they're not like that in the Torah. Okay, Pam, Shirley, Donna.
I just wanted to say again an example. I was driving outside of my town there, and I had a flat tire. So I called my car guy. He said he'd be there in 30 minutes. Well, in the meantime, this other guy stops and asked me if I needed help. He could see I did with my car, so he changed the tire for me. And I offered him some money. No, he wouldn't take that. I offered a bottle of wine. I had a case of wine in the car. And no, he couldn't do that. He said, the mitzvah. And if he accepted anything for it, then it would not have been a mitzvah.
Oh, okay, right. So if I help you fix your tire, it's a mitzvah.
Yeah.
Of course, it's still a
Only if I don't
mitzvah.
pay you.
Right. If you pay me for the service, then it's part of my job and it's part of my income, which
Right.
is okay, but it's not, yeah. So he'd rather get credit for having done a mitzvah than to. I would be a little more lenient and say that you give me a couple of bottles of good wine. It's just a token of appreciation. It's not
There you
not
go.
being. Yes, Marcia.
So looking at this Exodus 21, this is pretty tough stuff. I didn't realize that if you do things that you shouldn't be doing ethically, you should be put to death as under 14, 15, 16. Goodness.
Okay, well, these are
Takes his
pretty
father
serious
or his
things.
mother.
Reading from verse 12, he who fatally strikes a man shall be put to death. So if you are in a bar fight and you hit a guy and he dies, you should be put to death. If he did not do it by design, but it came about by an act of God, I will assign you a place to which he can flee. So there was a fight and people were jumping around, and this other guy happened to fall, kill himself by accident. So then you're not really, you didn't, it wasn't deliberate, it just kind of happened. So then there'd be a city of refuge. So let's say there'd be a city of refuge. Let's say you'd have to go to, somewhere like Kansas City, Missouri. And as long as you stay in Kansas City, Missouri, maybe Kansas City, Kansas also would be okay. You are within the boundaries of the city of refuge, and the relatives from Phoenix cannot come up there and hurt you. But if you start traveling, you go to Wichita for business, you're outside of the city of refuge, they can stop your car, beat you up, kill you, whatever.
Who determines whether that individual was guilty or not?
I guess the courts, the ancient, the Beit Din. Yes, Pam.
Rabbi, you called it an act of God. How are you defining an act of God?
Well, I'm quoting strictly from the Torah here. This is not me. This is not me. This is the translation here.
Okay.
But what I guess they mean by that is that, if there's a bar fight and you take a knife, your butter knife, and you stab a guy and he dies, you've killed him. But if there's a bar fight and everybody's just jumping around and you're like yelling at the guy and he backs up and he hits his head on the floor, it kind of happened because of you, but you didn't deliberately do anything. So that's what they call an act of God. He just fell kind of by accident, but you were kind of the cause, but you certainly weren't trying to kill him.
Yeah.
And you didn't actually do the killing, it just he fell, but it was kind of your responsibility, but not your fault, if that makes sense. So that's what they call here an act of God. Verse 14, when a man schemes against another and kills him treacherously, you shall take him from my very altar to be put to death. He who strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. Now, you don't have to kill your parent. If you hit your parent, if you strike your father or your mother shall be put to death. That's what Marcia is probably referring to. She said this is very harsh. He who kidnaps a person, whether he has sold him or still holding him, shall be put to death. He who insults his father or his mother shall be put to death. So you tell your parents, go to hell. That's it, death penalty. Okay, Bernie and then Cy.
How does this put to death stuff mesh with today's Israel?
No,
I mean, how do the Orthodox in Israel deal with those commandments?
there's no Sanhedrin, there's no temple, so you can't put to death anyone.
Do they have the death penalty in Israel?
Well, yeah, but it's not based on the Bible, it's based on civil law. They have a death penalty for unusual cases. They put to death, I think they put to death, the very first case of putting someone to death was, I believe, an Israeli army officer who was seen as being a traitor. And then they found out later he was innocent. It's not a well-known case, but I think it's from 1949. It's a very interesting case. And then the second one was Adolf Eichmann. So they do have a death penalty in rare cases. But that's not based on anything here. The all Orthodox will say we can't utilize these prescriptions because there's no Sanhedrin, and there can't be a Sanhedrin because there's no temple. But if the third temple were to be built, they might bring these things back. So children would have, I mean, it certainly would get your children not to curse you. Yes, Sai.
Well, you answered part of the question, but in the United States, how do the very Orthodox handle these situations as it relates to our governmental justice system? Let's
Well,
assume
there's
the Orthodox had something similar to a Sanhedrin. How could they would be in conflict, wouldn't they?
there's a Talmudic law in Aramaic. The expression is dina de malchut dina. The law of the land is the law. So living in someone else's land, you have to accept civil law overrides Jewish law when the two conflict. So if you have a law that says that if two people are involved in a civil dispute, that civil dispute has to be taken to the civil courts of the country. And the Jewish law says if there's a civil dispute between two Jews, it has to go to a Beit Din. Then Orthodox would agree that the civil law overrides, and therefore you would take your dispute to the civil courts.
Okay.
If the government, if the state of Arizona would say you have to go to civil courts, but if both parties agree, hi Natalie, if both parties agree to take it to Jewish court, then you can move it from state court to Jewish court, then you could do that. But if the state of Arizona says no, it has to stay in civil court, then it has to stay in civil court. So, for example, Orthodox Jews require a get as part of a Jewish divorce. And because the civil authorities require a civil divorce, the Orthodox rabbis would require a civil divorce first as a prerequisite for the, yeah, you need both. So now the only exception would be if the civil laws are discriminatory or persecuting Jews or, in complete conflict with Judaism. So if there's a law saying every time you go to court in Arizona, you have to eat a pork sandwich, then Jewish law would say you have to violate that. But as long as it's compatible with Judaism, then the Talmudic thinking was you go with the law of the land is the law. Richard.
To change the subject just a little bit, on page 55 is a very interesting interpretation of what the mitzvot means. And apparently some interpreters use this as a purpose of mitzvot to connect you to heaven and to God. This seems to be probably would be the Zohar and other mystical individuals, because we don't talk about heaven and hell, but according to this interpretation, it's very important.
Correct. Yeah, I'm going to do this Friday. I'm going to tell people that in order to go to heaven, they have to do certain things.
Oh, I'll be. Oh, that's good. I don't have to worry about it. I'll be in Palm Springs Friday night.
Well, Palm Springs is heaven, so you've already made it.
Maybe even at the temple, my friend's temple. We'll see.
Okay, are we ready to start reading? Who'd like to read? We're on page 53, Perek Aleph, Ethical and Ritual Mitzvot.
Rabbi, I don't know if you
Yeah.
could hear me. It's Natalie.
Yes,
I've
I
been
hear you.
on, but I can't get my picture or anything.
It's up,
So
it's up.
I just wanted you to know I'm on. Oh, I don't see it.
Your
Okay.
picture came on about 3 or 4
Yeah,
minutes
you're
ago.
there.
Yeah, we
Did
can
you
see
hear
you.
me say hello, Natalie? I said that when your
Yes,
picture.
yes, but I wanted you to know I was on earlier than that too.
Yeah, we saw we saw the
Okay,
little
yeah, but
square.
I don't see me. So
And about 4
okay,
minutes ago, your picture came on, so you did something.
okay. I've been trying to.
So welcome, it worked.
Okay.
You
It
don't have
worked.
to do your hair. It looks very good.
That's where we get the expression from your lips to God's ears.
Pam, would you start reading?
Sure.
We're on page 53 at the very beginning on the left column.
Okay. Parrot Aleph, ethical and ritual mitzvah. Parashat Mitzpatim begins with the words of God to Moses. These are the rules that you set before them. It is then continues with a detailed list of the mitzvot or commandments that the people are to follow. It is a long list containing a wide variety of rules. There are commandments having to do with the treatment of slaves, the consequences of murder, kidnapping, or cursing one's parents, the responsibilities of one person to another in case of damage or neglect, concern for the stranger and the poor, warnings to judges and witnesses about honesty and fairness in court. There are also mitzvot dealing with the observance of the Sabbath, the sabbatical year, and festivals of Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, along with those prohibiting the boiling of a kid in its mother's milk, of worshiping idols, or even mentioning the names of other gods. Why this Torah portion is called Mishpatim, or laws, it is not the only portion containing a list of commandments. Throughout the 5 books of Torah, we find hundreds of commandments or mitzvot that begin with the words, you shall, or you shall not. Many of these are repetitious. The 10 commandments, for example, mentioned in Exodus 22-14, are repeated in Deuteronomy 5-6-18, and many other rules recorded in the Mishpatim are also found scattered throughout Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Perhaps the first commentator to ask the question, how many mitzvot did God give to the Jewish people at Sinai, was Rabbi Simlai, who taught both in the land of Israel and Babylonia in the 14th century CE, declared that Moses received 613 commandments at Sinai. So it divided these into 2 categories. 2.48 were mitzvah aseh, positive commandments, which begin with the words you shall, or correspond to 248 parts of the human body. 365 were mitzvah lo tashaseh, or negative commandments, which begins with the words you shall not, or correspond to the number of days in the solar year. The commandments, to emphasize, were meant to guide human beings in the use of all physical powers during each day of the year. Other commentators divide the mitzvah Torah into 2 different categories. The commandments dealing with the observance of Shabbat, holidays, diet, and other religious practices are called mitzvot ben Adam Malkom, commandments between the human being and God. Those commandments dealing with the ethical and moral relationships between human beings are labeled mitzvot ben Adam Azin, commandments between the individual and other human beings. Keep going.
Yeah.
This division of the mitzvot into ritual and ethical categories, however, does not mean that the interpreters of Jewish tradition considered one set of commandments more important than the other. Both were of equal significance, and often commentators point out that the ritual mitzvot lead a person to ethical action. For example, for instance, a part of fulfilling the mitzvah of making a Pesach Seder is to invite all who are hungry to eat. Despite the fact that early commentators had created 2 categories of mitzvot and that Rabbi Simla uses the figure of 613 mitzvot, it is not until the 8th century that the Babylonian teacher Simeon Cairo actually tried to identify which of the hundreds of commandments mentioned in the Torah were to be counted among them. Cairo offers an explanation for each mitzvah, but he differs with Rabbi Simla in his count of the positive and negative commandments. Cairo lists 265 positive mitzvot and 348 negative mitzvot. Following Cairo, many other scholars offer their own explanations and lists of what is known as the Tarya mitzvot, made up of letters Tav, representing the numerical value of 400, Resh, representing the value of 200, Yad, representing the 10 commandments, and Gimel, representing the value of 3. While most commentators agree with Rabbi Simon that Torah mitzvot, 613 commandments were given by God to Moses, there is no agreement about which of the commandments were to be included on the list. Great scholars like Simon Gan, poets like Solomon bin Elisha the Elder, as well as philosophers like Vesa ben Yatzla, all differ with one another. Each offers a different point of view, underscoring the fact that Jewish tradition was never static and unchanging, but always had room for the evolution of new insights and interpreters of how Jews shall practice their faith.
Okay, this is all a long introduction. It basically repeats what I'd already said, but I think it was good to read just to get an idea. Cy and then Evelyn.
It's overwhelming to think that all these commandments exist, and to me, it takes away the individuality of the person. There's nothing left outwardly that the person has to do on his own. His whole life is directed in certain avenues. What's there that he has to do to think about? And if he does, he has to act accordingly to the laws. He can't act individually for himself. And that to me is a big negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Cy, we're trying to sign you up for Orthodox Judaism, but you're just not cooperating. You're too individualistic. You have to agree to do what everyone else does in the same way. Evelyn.
I was going to comment on two things. One, that Sai said, knowing someone who is Orthodox, and that every indecision that she has, she says she has to go to the rabbi and ask him. He cannot make a decision on her own. And I agree with Sai that this destroys the individual and the ability to think for oneself. But I wanted to go back to the first paragraph that Pam read about slaves and treating slaves. When did the Hebrews, who themselves were supposedly slaves, take on slavery, and when did this no longer exist among the Jews themselves? It's a puzzle.
It's an interesting point, but it really doesn't connect to today. So, and it's a long topic and a difficult one.
Okay, we're gonna hold it to you for the future.
So I'd rather not even try to answer the question, but just very briefly, I guess, slavery was just an assumed situation that there was slavery in the ancient Near East. Everybody had slaves. The form of slavery being talked about here is mostly temporary, as a result of debt. So Richard runs up his credit cards, can't pay them off. He gets sold into slavery for 7 years.
Indentured in a sense, rather than a slave in the way we tend to think of slavery.
Right. It wasn't necessarily permanent, but there were Jewish slaves that were sold as a result of debt. There were non-Jewish slaves that were acquired through war. They each had their own rules. Some slaves were temporary. Some slaves ended up being permanent. So it was complicated, but the idea that the Israelites were so morally advanced that they didn't have any slavery would not be true. Okay. But hopefully we'll have time to deal with that in its own section, because obviously this is a very important subject. Okay. Who wants to read? Marcia, would you help us?
Sure.
We're on the right column of page 54, right below the little photo of Maimonides.
Okay. It was the great teacher. Is that where I am?
Yeah.
Yes.
The great teacher Moses Maimonides, however, who formulated the most authoritative list of the Taryag mitzvot. Writing in Egypt in 1168 CE at the age of 35, Maimonides created his Sefer HaMitzvot, using as his basis both Rabbi Simlai's division of the 613 commandments and the two categories of mitzvot bien Adam lemakom and mitzvot bien Adam lechavero. Maimonides offers an explanation for each mitzvah and arguments for living one's life according to the discipline of each one. He argues that the commandments are meant to suppress the human being's natural tendency to correct our moral qualities and to keep straight all our doings. But Maimonides also realizes that there are many commandments that do not seem to improve human behavior. Such commandments as not eating pork or crab meat, or those having to do with sacrifices during temple times, do not seem to have any meaning at all. How shall we explain them? How can we even justify continuing their observance? In response, Maimonides writes, "It is fitting for a person to meditate upon the laws of the Holy Torah and to comprehend their full meaning to the extent of his ability. However, a law for which a person finds no reason and understands no cause should not be considered trivial. One should be on guard not to rebel against a commandment decreed for us by God only because the reason for it is not understood."
All right, very important medieval debate on what's called Tamei Mitzvot, the reasons for the commandments. So raise your right hand if it seems obvious to you why there'd be a rule against murder.
Right hand.
Right hand. Natalie, I can't see your hand.
Because I can't see you.
And Donna, and there's Shirley.
Yeah,
All right. All right. So most of us agree that if the Torah says do not murder, there's an obvious reason for that. All right. What about raise your right hand if you think there's an obvious reason, do not eat crab meat. Okay, Richard.
I'm allergic to it.
What?
I'm allergic to it.
I can't hear.
He's allergic.
Ah. Okay, Sai.
I want to go back to the comment about you shall not murder. I don't think that that in itself is enough. I think the fact that when you say you shall not murder, there has to be the addition that is what is going to happen if you do murder. The mere fact that you say you shall not murder, to me, is meaningless. I mean, yeah, you're not supposed to, but most people don't murder because of the punishment, rather than any rule that says you shall not murder.
But it says thou shalt be put to death, doesn't it?
Yes.
I think that's the emphasis, or that should be the emphasis. The punishment fits the crime.
So what is your point, Sai?
My point is just making rules without some sort of
Consequence.
punishment, if you will, is
A
very
deterrent. You need a deterrent to discourage people from
Okay, well, some of the laws there have consequences. For example, it says if you curse your parents, you shall be put to death. If you hit your parents, you shall be put to death. But other ones just say you're not allowed to eat animals that don't do this or don't do that. It doesn't say what's going to happen to you, but it says don't do it. And it may not say, from our purposes right here, more important than the consequence is to have a reason. You shall not eat crab meat because crabs aren't ethical and we're trying to train you to be ethical, so you should only eat ethical animals. I don't know.
What is an ethical animal?
Well,
He just made that up.
I'm
Yeah.
trying, ethical animals are animals that are concerned with ethical behavior. So like deer,
I love it.
Bambi's very sweet. She would never do anything bad deliberately. So you can eat her because she's a good ethical animal. But a
That's
crab, they steal from other crabs
I think
and
they're
they're not
bottom.
nice.
Not
And you
only,
don't
not
all
only
right,
maybe they're,
I'm trying to come up with something. I'm not saying it's perfect. Evelyn,
well, what,
I think many of these forbidden animals are scavengers, such as vultures or lobster or crabs, whatever they eat detritus. They eat dead bodies, and therefore they would be considered unclean. A lion would be considered unclean, or a tiger, because they eat dead meat. And so I think it was perhaps a health issue originally, and that was how these things developed, that certain foods were considered unsuitable because they were essentially not healthy.
but
not only
Maimonides'
that,
point is that people like Evelyn should be discouraged from giving her explanations because
well,
if
not only
Evelyn
that,
explains why certain things shouldn't be eaten because they're scavengers, she's
yes,
trying to explain everything. What if she can't? But then when she can't come up with an explanation, or when Donna doesn't find one of Evelyn's explanations convincing, then the whole group here is liable to say, we don't accept Evelyn's explanation, or explanation of why you shouldn't do this is stupid. And we're all going to go out to have lunch and eat crab meat.
Crab meat.
And Maimonides says, no, you can, if you're smart and you're disciplined, there's nothing wrong with a group of intellectuals trying to figure out the reason for certain things.
well,
However, you should start with the premise that it doesn't matter. You have to observe them anyway. And
um,
that was what he really wanted to stress, because he was afraid that people would have these discussions, not be convinced, and then stop observing. He probably also was aware that some of them had really no basis in anything that was rational. Yes,
yes.
Donna.
um, Evelyn is right in all of what she said, but the main reason, as I have been taught, was that they don't clean the animal before it is served. It is impossible to clean all the bad stuff out of it that Evelyn had suggested. So if it's not possible to clean it, that there's special rules for if you kill a deer, you bleed that deer immediately out where it has been killed, and you can't do that with a crab. You can't do it, so it is not to be eaten. And also back to the murder thing, there is still a discussion of the difference between murder and kill.
Okay. Bernie, Steve,
No.
Shirley, Natalie. Okay.
My rebuttal to Donna, it's more than just a matter of cleaning the animal. What it's a matter of the those animals eat dead animals, and therefore the process of decay has already started, and therefore what they're eating is unclean, and therefore the animal himself is ingesting stuff that would possibly harm and poison us, and therefore that's why the animal is considered unclean. I'm simply supplementing and augmenting what Donna had said.
I'm going to
But
talk
for
about lunch.
Maimonides, it's a Jewish law. You have to follow it. Period. End of point.
Yeah.
You want to speculate about where it came from or why it was made, that's fine. but you should, before you start any speculation, you should be committed to it. Now, in the Reform movement, we're not committed to it. I mean, I won't ask for hands who eats crab salad, but I suspect that it's at least half of us. So the whole Reform movement has violated Maimonides' most important injunction in this respect. And we have the theory in the Reform movement that you look at each mitzvah and you discuss among yourselves whether you find it religiously meaningful, and you observe it or don't observe it based on personal religious meaning. This is exactly the opposite of what Maimonides was pushing for. Sai.
I always find it interesting that all the rules and regulations come about because of one individual. Somebody decided that this is the way it has to be, and now it's written down in the good book. At no time, as far as I know, was there a cumulative thinking that this is what the group thinks it should be, and this is why we're doing it. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's how Judaism developed. People like, Maimonides were very influential. But, he became so influential because a lot of people agreed with him. And a
Well,
lot of people.
I always go back to our own Constitution, where we sat around, a whole group sat around and came to certain conclusions that we all live by.
Which is similar to what the sages in the Talmud did. There was a couple of hundred sages, depending on the time, maybe, or maybe a few more. And they went on for like 300 years arguing back and forth, and they developed a certain consensus.
And today in Israel, if a restaurant serves any forbidden foods, they are not considered kosher, and the Orthodox will not go.
Correct. Okay, Marcia, would you continue reading?
Sure.
You can skip the box.
I didn't do the paragraph on the bottom of 54 on the right side, like Maimonides. You want me to do that?
Yeah, start there.
Like Maimonides, many other commentators have tried to understand the reasons for the mitzvot of Jewish tradition. While some agree with Maimonides that it is difficult and impossible to find meanings for all the commandments, most believe that the mitzvot have special purpose and significance. The Talmudic teacher, Rab, holds that the commandments were given by God to the Jewish people in order to discipline them, although their observance will be refined and strengthened in character and behavior through their observance. Another ancient interpreter claimed that it made no difference to God how animals were slaughtered. All the mitzvot having to do with ritual slaughter and others as well were meant to purify the people of Israel. In other words, the commandments were considered exercises, a means of training people to be more sensitive to one another and to the world in which they live. I think that's answers what you were saying. Another teacher suggests the commandments are meant to make us more righteous. Each of us has the potential of adding kindness and justice to the world, or of adding to the pain and suffering of others. We should see ourselves as half good and half evil. By observing mitzvot, we become more just and loving and add to the good in our lives and in the world. It's from Genesis. Okay. For Rabbi Abahu, the commandments were not necessarily just a way of improving human behavior, but also a means of preserving the survival of the world. He argues that God created the world as a gardener creates a beautiful orchard. The commandments given to Israel are like instructions given to those chosen to tend the garden. If they are followed, the orchard would survive, flower, and feed all who require its food. It's from Exodus, Rabbah. Other interpreters believe that the purpose of the mitzvot is only partially connected to improving human behavior or to promoting the survival of the world. The commandments, they maintain, are meant to guarantee entrance into the olam haba, the world to come, or heaven. All the mitzvot that the people of Israel do in this world will come and testify in their favor in heaven, said one teacher. Another poetically declares that each commandment a person does in this world forms a thread of light in heaven, and all of the threads are spun together to form a garment for that person to wear when he dies and goes to heaven. For these commentators, the mitzvot are the means through which one ensures a place and a garment in the world to come.
So according to this, if you don't do enough mitzvot, you could be wandering around heaven for all eternity naked. Pam.
So are they implying that God is creating? I'm not God. God is counting the number of mitzvot that each person does?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You see that in a lot of readings that have Israeli, not Israeli, but Jewish content in them. That you're adding to your blessings for when you get to the world to come.
But it's a nice idea, isn't it, that the person who's constantly helping other people, that every, nice thing they do is added to the ledger so that when they go up to heaven, they're going to be treated like a celebrity. This is somebody who spent 50 years helping, all sorts of people, as opposed to the selfish person that didn't help anybody.
Who's still in heaven.
But is walking around naked. Yes,
Maybe they
outside.
want to be.
Oh, great. I'm going to have that vision.
The nudist section of heaven is over the left, and the clothed section is over on the right. Side, did you want to say something? No. Steve?
No.
Evelyn? Steve?
Yes, the comment about the weaving a garment so that you will be clothed in heaven. And that is the assumption that you still assume a corporeal form in heaven. And my attitude would be the soul has no form. And so why should it continue to be human? Why do we tend to think of ourselves as superior forms per se? If we were superior, our form on earth is really, we are really not very strong as human beings. We have no outer shell, we have no protection. As human beings, I think it is only our brains that have permitted humans to become the dominant form on this earth as such. And who knows whether we will be dominant 500,000 years from now, maybe another form of life. And my feelings are, if there is a soul, why should it have a human form? Why can't it be something else, as something that we don't understand or can't possibly anticipate? But it doesn't necessarily have to be a human form. We tend to think of the afterlife in human terms of life on this earth. And is that how we should be thinking about it?
Okay. Marcia.
So most religions give you some sort of a present, a gift for being good on this earth, I guess. You have Christians, their concept of heaven, and the same is true for the Muslims, etc. So this is the Jewish version of it, I suppose, right? So no one seems to think that people on this earth can be good for the sake of being good. It doesn't seem to be, I guess, it doesn't, it's not that enticing, I guess, for people to think about doing good deeds because they should be doing good deeds.
Yeah, no, Judaism has a concept like that, of course. L'shem Shemaim, people who do mitzvot just for the purpose of heaven. But there's an assumption that not everyone, or maybe not even most people, will do things just because it's good most of the time. So that if If you just rely on people's innate goodness, you'll get some people doing good stuff some of the time, but they want a society that will run properly. Therefore, you expect most people to observe most mitzvot most of the time. So to do that, you have to have a system of rewards and punishments. But there's definitely the concept that people do things just because they want to be nice.
Okay. One would hope.
Natalie?
Yeah, I wasn't aware that all Judaism believed in going to heaven and an afterlife.
Why?
Why wasn't I aware of it?
Right.
I heard other things. You
When you get to heaven, our Torah study will meet on cloud 24.
do I have to have my clothes on?
Well, that we have no control over. And it's meeting in person there. So if you don't have any clothes, it could be a little embarrassing, but what can we do?
Will it be
So
on Wednesday?
And
all Judaism,
we're gonna do Torah study at the same time, same day. If we have a day and time, the heaven may not have days and times, in which case we could do Torah study, all day, every day.
and if you have it on your phone, in your calendar, it gets complicated here.
That unfortunately, I know for a fact that you're not allowed to take your cell phones into heaven.
I jokingly say, when I get to heaven, St. Peter is going to ask me for my birth date because I have to give it everywhere I go here in Sun City.
And it has to be truthful, or else it can't get in.
So
Right.
Of your social
He'll
security
say,
number.
what year did you say? We don't have any record for such a person in that year. But 20 years earlier, we find your records. Are you sure you didn't make a mistake that you were born in?
Rabbi, so Jews believe we go to heaven, but we don't go to hell?
And Donna.
No, it depends. Most of us here are planning to go to heaven. But Natalie, I don't know about you. But
No, I just want to know what my options are so I know
your
how to
options
behave.
are heaven or hell.
And there's some sort of a purgatory situation, isn't there?
Right, yes.
Is there a situation where you go to this place, I forgot what it's called, I think with an S, and if you haven't completed, I don't know, not a certain amount of mitzvot, but what you were here to complete. Like, I'm materialistic here. So that means I have to stay in this place to prove that I can learn not to be before I go to heaven. I have to work on things in this place. It's not hell.
Well, there's a concept in some forms of Jewish mysticism, Gilgul Neshama, where your soul will be recycled back to earth so you can learn additional lessons you didn't learn in your previous life.
Oh, uh-huh. Well,
But
what happens if I come back and I'm in a tree? I'm a different form. I'm a rock. So how can I learn not to be materialistic if I'm a rock?
I think that particular teaching assumes that your soul has to be recycled into another human body.
Rabbi.
That you can't come back as a pig or an oyster.
Hold
it, Evelyn, and then Cy.
What if this human being dies young and has no opportunity to do any mitzvahs over a long life? What happens to that soul?
Good question.
Good question. So maybe they can start again and see if they.
Would you believe in reincarnation?
Cy.
I want to make Natalie feel better. Natalie, you don't have to do it on an individual basis. If you live in the United States, we're doing it. The country is doing it. We're helping other countries out. we're giving food to various people. You're included in it. We're all included in it. So when God, looks down, he doesn't say, well, Natalie did this or did that. He'll say that Natalie was part of a huge group. The huge group did the right thing at the right time, so she's going to heaven.
I wrote an email to God on this very point. I said, with all the foreign aid the government of the United States is giving and all the taxes I'm paying, and I have to pay more taxes this year because I sold house in Georgia and I didn't buy another
more
rental
taxes,
property.
a chance to go to heaven or better.
So I'm paying a lot more taxes and I want all those things credited to me. And God's assistant wrote me back a very nice email saying, no, you only get credit for things you personally did. Tax, it doesn't matter how much taxes you paid, doesn't matter how many good things your government may have done, it doesn't count.
But you get a quicker ride to heaven because you paid all that money.
No.
No.
Does the Jewish religion?
I'm giving up on Natalie. I don't think we're going to see her up there.
Does the Jewish religion support?
We'll try to set up a feed with Hal so we can at least keep her in our Torah study group.
Thank you.
Does the Jewish religion support reincarnation?
So some forms of Kabbalah, some forms of mysticism talk about that. Of course, other forms do not. So it's like with everything in Judaism.
Talk about it? Do they talk about it in the sense of believing in it?
Well, a certain group does, yes, but not a. So there's no one view on anything. There's ideas presented, and there's really, there's no group in Judaism that said this idea is right and this idea is wrong. Like the Council of Nicosia in the church and other councils in the early Middle Ages said anyone who believes in this is a heretic and you should kill them. So Christianity established a doctrine. There was in the Vatican the office of the doctrinal, truth, and anything else was wrong. Judaism never had stuff like that. So you could believe a wide variety of things. That didn't mean that other people didn't like it. Maimonides was hated by certain people because of his views. He, in turn, didn't like some other people because of their views. But there are different views on almost everything. Yes, Richard.
I don't think that's very comforting.
This is for Natalie. Last night, Natalie, God came to me in a dream and said, you're going to wear a white toga in heaven. How about that?
That's pretty good. Because I'm materialistic.
Okay.
Marcia, back to you. Right column on 55. Under
author.
The picture of Nahum Sarna.
In his study of Exodus, contemporary interpreter Nahum Sarna, we met him before, I think, makes an observation about the unique nature of the ethical and ritual laws found within the Torah, and especially within the Parsha Mishpatim. While the laws of other ancient people are divided between secular and religious matters, the Torah presents an indiscriminate commingling and interweaving of cultic topics and moral imperatives, for which there is absolutely no analogy. Within the Torah, there is no attempt to separate ethical and ritual concerns. They are combined. Ritual commandments and celebrations often lead to ethical action. The Torah, Sarna writes, treats life holistically. Everything a person does, secular or religious, is seen as a potential mitzvah meant to serve God and uplift life with meaning. From his book, I guess, Exploring Exodus. Sarna's view is shared by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. For Heschel, Judaism is a science of deeds, or mitzvot, that are meant to add the taste or flavor of holiness to human life. Being a Jew, Heschel explains, is not just a matter of performing rituals and moral deeds. It is realizing that in doing The doing of the mitzvah, one is seeking to do what God wants of us. It is lighting a lamp before God. It is changing or transforming ourselves by that light so that we absorb the holiness of deeds. The purpose of the mitzvot, Heschel says, is to refine man. They were given for the benefit of man, to protect and to ennoble him, to discipline and to inspire him. For God in search of man. While for Heschel, the doing of the mitzvot is meant to elevate us to new levels of holiness, to deepen our sensitivities and our awareness of what God requires of us. For Rabbi Herman E. Shalman, we are to do the mitzvot because we are the descendants of those ancestors, the children of those parents who said at Sinai, we shall do what we shall hear, and we shall hear. The commandments, in other words, are our historical inheritance. They are the way in which God continues to speak to us. Rabbi David Polish agrees. Mitzvot are signs of the covenant, affirmed and reaffirmed through the ages at various turning points in which Jewish existence stood in the balance. Thus, the mitzvot around birth, Mila, circumcision, naming, education, marriage, and death take on added meaning because in each case, the individual is made conscious of his own role in Jewish history. For these thinkers, the doing of each commandment is a way of identifying as a Jew. It is a means of linking oneself to the historical covenant of the people of Israel with God.
Okay, so the last three paragraphs or so, yeah, he talks about Heschel, who's a very famous conservative Jewish thinker. Then he brings a couple Reform thinkers, Schalman and Polish, who I'm not really sure what they're trying to argue there. Schalman just says we should do the commandments because our ancestors did the commandments. And Polish says we should do the commandments because it's something that makes us aware of our own roles in Jewish history, a means of linking oneself to the historical covenant. So they're just saying we should do it because our ancestors did it, because that's the way to express Jewishness. But this is precisely the type of thinking that younger people rejected. And they said it's very weak. There's no real, existential purpose there. It just says we should do it because everyone did it before us. And it's a way to maintain tradition. But if the younger generation wants to be revolutionary and not maintain tradition, you have to have a reason, a very compelling reason why you should maintain tradition, not just to say it's tradition and you should do it because it's traditional. Marcia, and then Steve.
I'm probably going to say something similar. Why do we celebrate Jewish holidays? It's the same sort of thing. It's a link to the Jewish identity, I think, don't you think? I think.
Well, it may be true, but for a thinker to argue that seems pretty weak. I want a thinker to argue there's some, overwhelming reason that, not just to say we do it because it's a way of affirming tradition. Heschel certainly tries to do that. He said, it adds holiness and it's what God wants us to do. It's lighting a lamp before God. It's transforming ourselves by that light to absorb the holiness of deeds. That's inspiring. I mean, you may think it doesn't mean much, but it's at least trying to give a transcendent purpose to mitzvah and saying, if you do a mitzvah, you're lighting the light of you're lighting a light by which we absorb holiness. I mean, it's trying very much. The Polish and Shalman, at least according to this, just say we do it because it connects us to previous Judaisms. So what? The younger generations say, well, we don't care about connecting the previous generation. We want to do something that's real, that's purposeful. And you're not giving me anything. You can see from this why so many people in the 60s and 70s just said, forget it. I mean, these Shalman and Polish come off very, very, very weak here, according to what I can say. Okay, Steve.
Okay, typically, well, in a number of congregations that I've been in and have observed before, a B'nai Mitzvah creates or does a mitzvah project. And they are to go out either into the community or do something for the community to enrich themselves and make themselves a better person, and also to understand the mitzvahs that they are commanded to do, and also to understand what what ethical means there are out in the world, and maybe be a part of it.
Mhm. And that's very important, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And so the Mitzvah project may only take a few weeks or a few months, but the symbolic importance is saying it's not just about learning Hebrew, it's not just about praying, it's not just about the temple, it's about doing good in the world.
Absolutely.
And that is, it's not exactly Heschel where he says lighting the light, lighting the guide and transforming ourselves by that light to absorb holiness, but it's sort of a similar concept that we should practice Judaism so that we can bring joy to others in this world.
And so therefore, in an early age, these kids are taught to do the right thing or do a mitzvah, and be a better person.
And to find maybe one specific group, whether it be the homeless or animals or whatever, and to spend a lot of time trying to help that group on the theory that you can't fix the whole world, but you at least can if you put a lot of energy into one corner, you can at least make something better for some group, a little bit, at least locally.
Correct.
And you have obligation to try your best to do that. And in my day, a lot of the kids would do animals. So they'd volunteer at the homeless shelter for animals and things like that. And that was very meaningful that they could help dogs who'd been abandoned or had been hurt, whatever. So you help you volunteer once a week for a year at an animal shelter, you can actually help some dogs.
And cats?
And cats. I'm sorry to discriminate. Sai.
You mentioned before, as did Marsha, the importance of tradition, and I think we all agree to that. But yet, when you look back at the history of mankind, you look at it and you see that tradition really does not exist, particularly in a political way. Man has constantly changed and is still going on in change. And tradition is the least important thing from a political point of view as compared to religion, where tradition is something that is very, very important. And I think that's an interesting concept.
Good, thank you, Sai. Natalie, Shirley, Pam.
I think at least when Steve was talking about the projects, the mitzvah projects, it gave people a feeling of individuality and something, a passion that they can follow, as opposed to something, here's a list, pick one, and being imposed by the religion or the group, the temple. So maybe it was a good beginning to be proactive.
Evelyn.
I think the purpose of these community projects is to form not so much an individual satisfaction, though it does it does create an individual satisfaction, but to create a sense of community within that particular group and from that group reaching out into the greater community, doing good, quote unquote. But I think initially its purpose is to coalesce a group of people so that they feel that they are important within the group. They are all working together to create a purpose. And this sense of belonging and cohesiveness, I think, is critical for society, that no man should be alone, but that he should belong to a group. And that group is always part of a larger group and a larger group, et cetera, et cetera. It is that sense of society belonging initially to their own people. It's tribal mentality originally that expanded to national, international, et cetera, et cetera. So we as human beings need to feel we are part of a community. This is why the temples, the synagogues have survived after the destruction of the temple and synagogue. We survived, Judaism survived because of these smaller groups that continued on the teaching of Torah and the practice of Judaism. And so in the absence of a central location, and because we became a diaspora around the world, actually Judaism, I think, survived because of it. Does anybody agree or disagree with me?
When I said about individuality, I was thinking about what the rabbi was talking about with younger people who have things imposed upon them and reject that. So this gives them an opportunity to believe in something, follow through, but still be part of the temple, part of the community, as opposed to, my mother goes on peace marches, so that's what I'm interested in, and I go with my mother. It links you to the group mentality and to Judaism because it's from the guys of the temple who's running it all. And your bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. So
now
I
what
think
maybe
it does serve what you said, Evelyn.
What was that? I'm sorry, dear.
No, I think it serves what you're saying, that purpose. But I think there's so much of, well, this day you have to go to temple. This is your homework. This is, your religious homework. This is your school homework, and on and on. And why do I have to go? Because you're Jewish, and because, if you want to have a big party, then you have to go. I just think that it serves the communal, the Jewish, but it also resonates as an individual choice.
Mm-hmm.
But it also gives you comfort knowing you are part of a larger group.
Yes, no, I'm not denying that, but I think the fact that so many young people are told what to do and why, the explanation is because your grandma expects it, because everybody else and all of that. So I think it gives them an individual feeling of accomplishment, and both individual and being connected. I think what you're saying, but I think also that individuality is important, just like in Reform Judaism, we don't follow all the mitzvot. We pick and choose a lot.
And today Maimonides made his opinion on that, unfortunately, very clear. And he says that's exactly what you're not supposed to do.
And that's not what I say.
Natalie is disagreeing with Maimonides. You have to talk sense into her.
Watch out.
What we did not resolve is this ethical versus ritual mitzvot, that some mitzvot are strictly ritualistic and some mitzvot are ethical in a more general sense. And so there's this division, and he doesn't really focus on that much in the whole essay, which is interesting. But there's definitely these two types of mitzvot. There's also at the beginning of the essay, he also says there's the positive and the negative mitzvot, which is less important from our point of view today, but is also. So there's different ways to divide the mitzvot. Maimonides says you're supposed to do them all regardless. Reform Judaism says you do them if you find them meaningful. So ethical mitzvot, the criteria would be, does it actually make things more ethical? The ritual commandments is there any purpose to this ritual that I find meaningful? And you're supposed to take it seriously and study it and try to do it. And then if you don't find it meaningful, you can stop. Final comments. Pam? Donna?
Something I've been wanting to ask, and probably it's too much for now, but you had mentioned some of it at the beginning today, and that is about somebody, a Gentile that converts to Judaism. Is that what they're converting to? Or many of them think they are converting to being a Jew?
Ask the question again.
Which is it? When somebody converts to either Judaism or being a Jew, are they converting to Judaism, the religion of Judaism, or to being a Jew?
Okay, this is an Evelyn question, like the one Evelyn asked about slavery. What are you converting to? Are you converting to be the people or the religion? Can I defer that to another occasion?
Of course, that's what I said. It's probably you don't have much time left.
And it's even more complicated than the slavery question.
That would be a great sermon.
And Richard, I wanted to introduce my new ghostwriter starting this Friday.
I'll start it out, my fellow Americans and others.
So if I get a lot of compliments, why have your sermon suddenly improved? You can credit Dr. Bass. If you get a lot of letters saying, why have the sermon suddenly devolved?
Deteriorated.
Well, I have a funny story about that. My wife was president of a temple for 2 years, got back in the 80s at a temple in Springfield, Temple Israel. And she was a terrible writer. She was always nervous up there. So she had our friend Zale Glaberman, who was the chief speechwriter for the governor of Illinois, Edgar, as well as his liaison man in the Senate. He was called the Czar of the Senate. He wrote all her speeches. Everybody thought the speeches were wonderful.
All right, well, I can't take advantage of him, so I'm going to have to utilize you. Okay, over to you, Steve.
One announcement I want to make, and then Rabbi, I'm sure you've got a few about your classes coming up. The Jewish Film Festival starts on February the 18th through March the 3rd. There are 4 films being held at the Harkins Arrowhead. I think that you guys would be quite interested in. And one of them is remembering Gene Wilder. So it's a great opportunity to go and watch films that are Jewish oriented and or have Jewish characters in them. So keep that in mind. Rabbi, you've got courses coming up.
We're starting a course on the prophets. Of course, we all know Jeremiah was a bullfrog, but we don't know much about Isaiah. And that's starting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. We have about 18 people already signed up. We're meeting in the chapel. If you show up, you can sign up on the spot. Just come a few minutes before 10. And it's 4 sessions. Anything else that anyone else wants to announce? We have a Saturday morning prayer group in a private home in Sun City Grand. It's the third Saturday of every month. And you can contact me for further information if you don't drive at night, but you live locally. Bernie is planning to come to that once he gets his helicopter. Okay, over to you, Steve.
All right, let's conclude then with the final blessing, and then we can get on with the rest of our day. Baruch atah Adonai
Adonai, Eloheinu,
melech
melech
haolam,
haolam,
asher natan lanu Torah emet
emet,
v'chayei olam
v'olam,
atah b'tokeinu.
v'tokeinu.
Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah
Adonai
Adonai,
notein
notein
haTorah.
Torah,
Blessed is Adonai
Adonai,
our
our
God,
God, ruler
ruler
of
of the universe, who has given us a teaching of truth
And
and
plant
planting within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. All right, everyone, have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you guys either Friday night or sometime soon. Take care, everyone. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Shalom.